Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
The Watergate scandal was a political controversy that dominated Richard Nixon's second administration. A minor burglary of the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee was quickly connected to the Republican president, who had been running for re-election at the time. Nixon's subsequent vehement denial of his involvement in and knowledge of the event led to his inevitable resignation when undeniable evidence surfaced that proved him a liar. The Watergate scandal was a significant event in U.S. history as it created a distrust of executive power and elevated the media to an unprecedented level of influence.
On June 17, 1972, a group of 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters, which was in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. A security guard noticing the intrusion alerted the police. The men were arrested as they attempted to repair wiretapping equipment. The break-in was quickly linked to the White House. One of the burglars, James McCord, was the security coordinator of the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CRP. The CRP would play a huge role in the Watergate scandal. It was soon discovered that G. Gordon Liddy, general counsel to the CRP, had supervised the break-in. In addition, the name of E. Howard Hunt, a former White House employee, was found in the notebook of one of the burglars, as was a check with his signature. Eventually, all of the burglars were connected loosely to the CRP. Meanwhile, despite increasing connections between the break-in and the White House, Nixon won the election of 1972 in one of the largest presidential landslides to date.
In January of 1973, the 7 men, the 5 burglars plus Hunt and Liddy, were tried in the U.S. District Court. 5 men pleaded guilty. The other 2, McCord and Liddy, were convicted and imprisoned. Soon after the trial, on February 7, 1973, the U.S. Senate voted completely unanimously to establish a select committee to investigate the Watergate break-in. Senator Sam Ervin was named the chairman of this committee. The total undivided unity of the Senate reflects how quickly the Watergate scandal was elevated to an extremely serious national issue. Only a few months ago, Nixon had won 49 out of 50 states in his second presidential election. Now, every single senator, without fail, voted against him. This dramatic reversal is one of the earlier signs of America's waning trust in executive authority. In April of 1973, the Nixon administration began to collapse as many of its top officials, both former and current, were implicated in the cover-up. On the 30th day of that month alone, Nixon's chief of staff and domestic counsel both resigned. Nixon also fired his White House counsel John Dean, who had become a key witness against the Republican president, and named a new attorney general, who, under Nixon's orders, soon appointed Archibald Cox as a special prosecutor for the Watergate investigation. A new development occurred in the Watergate investigation when, on July 16, 1973, Alexander Butterfield, a White House assistant, testified that there was a tape recording system in place in the Oval Office. Every single conversation in the president's office had been recorded since Nixon had been sworn in. Immediately, both Cox and Ervin subpoenaed this new source of evidence. However, Nixon refused to release the tapes, referencing presidential executive privilege, and ordered Cox to drop the subpoena. Cox refused.
Nixon's secretive and suspicious behavior, unabashedly trying to prevent evidence from being released, further hurt his public image, as an increasing percentage of the population began to lose trust in its commander-in-chief. Nixon, angered by Cox's refusal to drop the subpoena, ordered his attorney general and then his deputy to fire Cox. Both refused and resigned at the end of October of 1973. Nixon finally found someone willing to fire Cox in the then Solicitor General Robert Bork. Bork, promoted to acting Attorney General, acquiesced to the President's request, firing Cox. However, this was one of the worst things that Nixon could have done, inciting widespread public outrage. This relatively minor political move was dramatically named the Saturday Night Massacre. It was a major turning point in Nixon's popularity as distrust in the executive branch exploded, with people beginning to call for impeachment. Very quickly, public pressure forced Nixon to release the requested tapes and also to have another special prosecutor hired to replace Cox. He soon issued an infamous speech in response to the mounting accusations against him.
And I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes. But in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. President.
However, despite these attempts by Nixon to repair his image, the public continued to lose faith in him due to many inconsistencies with the tapes. For example, the White House claimed that 2 of the requested tapes had never been recorded. In addition, one of the released tapes contained a mysterious 18.5-minute gap, which Nixon's secretary admitted to have accidentally deleted. Experts proved that this was unlikely, however. The furious public accused the White House of deleting evidence. The House of Representatives voted to look into possible impeachment grounds for the president. The Senate committee continued to pressure Nixon for more tapes. In response, in April of 1974, Nixon released edited transcripts of some of the recordings. The transcripts, revealing Nixon's vulgar speech, edited to be censored with the words "expletive deleted," only made the public further question the morality of their leader. Although Nixon eventually released dozens of Watergate tapes and transcripts, he tenaciously refused to release others. Eventually, the United States v. Nixon case reached the Supreme Court. The court ruled totally unanimously, 8-0, against Nixon, forcing him to turn over the tapes. Whatever meager support Nixon had crumbled when these tapes reached public eyes. One specific tape, recorded on June 23, 1972, only a few days after the initial Watergate break-in, delivered the final blow to Nixon, proving his involvement in the cover-up of the incident. This tape became known as the smoking gun.
The way to handle this now is for us to have Walters call back right and just say, stay the hell out of this. This is here, we don't want you to further on. That's not an unusual development. And that would take care of it.
Days later, facing imminent impeachment, Nixon finally chose to resign. On August 8, 1974, Nixon announced his resignation, becoming the first and only U.S. president to date to step down from office.
The Watergate scandal had a profound effect even beyond Nixon's administration. Notably, it created a loss of faith in executive power, which was reflected through Congress's actions during and after the event. A number of initiatives were passed after Watergate to improve government ethics. Among these were the FBI Domestic Security Investigation Guidelines in 1976, which restricted the FBI's intelligence gathering, and the Intelligence Authorization Act in 1980, which required the executive branch to inform House and Senate committees of U.S. intelligence activities. Nixon's and the FBI's inappropriate actions throughout the Watergate scandal were large contributors to the passage of these laws, which demonstrate the fact that even the government had lost trust in its executive leader. This distrust in executive power was further evidenced in the unanimity against Nixon during the Watergate scandal. All 3 branches of the government turned against Nixon. The Senate was totally unanimous in its decision to investigate the Watergate break-in, voting 77-0, and the House was nearly as undivided in deciding to look into the grounds for impeachment, voting 410-4 against Nixon. In addition, the Supreme Court was also totally unanimous, voting 8-0 in the U.S. v. Nixon decision to force Nixon to reveal the requested tape. The U.S. v. Nixon case was a landmark decision limiting executive power in the future. It ruled that the president was not above the law. Finally, as the Watergate scandal progressed, Nixon's popularity with the public plummeted. After the smoking gun tape was released, Nixon's approval ratings were the lowest they had ever been for him, and many cried for his impeachment. He was angrily called Tricky Dick. All of these pressures eventually forced Nixon to resign, thereby severely limiting executive power in the future. Another major aspect of the Watergate scandal was the media presence. The media's level of influence soared to unprecedented levels. Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, 2 Washington Post reporters, exposed the scandal to the public through their thorough investigations. Woodward had an anonymous source from the White House called Deep Throat, who would later reveal himself to be Mark Felt, an FBI officer. Deep Throat provided information on FBI reports of the Watergate investigation. Woodward's and Bernstein's reporting showed the government the dangers of the media. The media became another check on the government's power. Overall, as a result of the scandal, the media gained tremendous power. It became strong enough to topple a president.
What began as a small break-in of the Democratic National Committee in the summer of 1972 evolved over the following couple of years into an unprecedented political calamity that would shape the United States for years to come. Never before had a president been so debased as to be forced to resign in order to escape impeachment. Nixon's immoral actions were exposed and propagated by an active media, one of the first times in history that the media had played such a leading role in investigating the government. Once Nixon's true nature was revealed, the public quickly lost trust in the president and turned on him. Even to this day, the Watergate scandal has impacted the perception of the president, weakening his power. Now, every move the president makes is scrutinized by the public. Undoubtedly, the Watergate scandal will continue to be a great influence for years to come.